Well, it's Fullmetal February, I guess. Maybe we'll make this a recurring thing. I think I've released some Fullmetal Alchemist videos in February before, so we'll see. First of all, if you're new here and want to see more videos on anime, movie reviews, and comic book stuff, please subscribe and hit that bell to help this channel grow and get bugged with notifications. All that algorithm stuff always helps. This video will act as sort of a sequel and conclusion to my revisiting of the 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist series, which took me about a year to complete. It's interesting that this retrospective video essay review thing will take on the form that contrasts and mirrors what the movie was to the original anime in a way, kind of acting as a spin-off, sequel, and also kind of its own thing. Anyway, I'll start off by saying that going back and watching the anime all the way through after about 15 or so years was pretty fun, and really allowed me to find new ways to appreciate the anime, which answered the question that had been bothering me for a little while, to be honest. Yes, it is in fact still one of my favorite shows. Feel free to go back and listen to the podcast along with your own viewings if you would like more details. That being said, this movie is one that I never really had any real urge to rewatch. Now, I don't remember hating it, but like many, I found it to be a bit underwhelming at the time. At least, I must have, since I only watched it once and never really went back. Although I remembered it fairly well, I can certainly say it benefited from the rewatch. For those who want the real quick thoughts, I feel like Shambala could be seen as more of an addendum or a coda, something supplementary to the series rather than being completely necessary to watch. It certainly is a conclusion, but if you like the somewhat open-ended point that the anime leaves us with, I still think you'd be satisfied just stopping there. And if you want more, you've got more. I remember over the years often mentioning that this movie feels more like a side adventure for those brothers rather than a focused conclusion. Some details are in order at this point, I guess. Brief synopsis. Ed and Al are on separate sides of the gate, with Al having no memory of the events of the series, while Ed is with his father in pre-Nazi Germany. Both brothers are determined to find each other and ultimately do, as Hohenheim is pulled into a plot by the Thule Society, these Nazi cultists, who believe that the world beyond the gate will give them the power they need to take over the world essentially. Ed and Al are united and have to stop the Thule Society from invading Amestris, as the villain, I forgot her name. We'll get to her later, wants to destroy Amestris instead. That's pretty much the main plot. Oh, and a bunch of loose ends of the series are wrapped up in ways that may somewhat be satisfying, but also kind of underwhelming at the same time. Almost like they were afterthoughts, but still respectful, I think. Let's start with the cons, as I do like to end things on a positive note. I do think that the reputation this film has in the fandom is pretty warranted when it comes to the issues and discussions I've had with friends over the years. Really, the biggest problem with the movie is, and I feel like this is an issue I mention a lot in reviewing media, even my own projects sometimes have these issues, is that it's trying to be multiple things. Two things specifically, which I've already kind of mentioned. It's a sequel to the show, and taking one concept of the series and making it the main focus. In a way, it's still following up on this concept, the other world, our world essentially, and the themes therein. But the whole twist about the gate was revealed basically at the end of the anime, so shoving more established things, like the characters, probably the greatest strength of FMA in general, and pushing them aside, probably rubbed some viewers the wrong way, like me. Basically, Izumi, Wrath, Gluttony, Hohenheim, and Envy all get killed off in this movie. I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, but it also seems convenient for a limited writing time. Admittedly, all of these characters do have arcs in the film that you could say were basically complete, but all of them, especially Wrath as a new ally, could have been richer through being expanded upon. Izumi is kind of the biggest casualty here, as she's killed off-screen, although getting to reunite with Wrath is a heartwarming moment that does still come off as effective. Hohenheim and Envy get sort of a resolution too, although it does technically work, it still feels a bit rushed, as Hohenheim is pretty much off-screen in the movie until his death. Gluttony is in some ways the most tragic in terms of his arcs, as the last scrap of his humanity being taken away turned him truly into a horrible monster. Once again, Wrath's sacrifice, much bloodier than I remember, felt like an emotionally and thematically strong enough resolution for him and Gluttony due to the delivery of the lines in the dub, the music, and the animation, etc. But it still does feel a tad bit rushed. I feel like that might be the main recurring word in this video. I've used it a lot already. Because most of the runtime is devoted to Ed in the early 1920s Germany. I almost forgot about Mustang. He's isolated himself to the guild, and never mind, he just comes back at the end and is a badass. There are also some minor plot issues, like why was Envy just waiting in a castle for years, never being found by anybody until the movie decided to happen? or how much of the Thule Society's plan kind of hinged on Ed accidentally stumbling onto their plot. Still, minor issues that I can mostly kind of gloss over. Interestingly, although I feel one of the biggest issues with the movie is the focus on the time in our Germany, I think it's also the biggest strength of the movie, and is easily the thing that I love the most about it. It's kind of weird. So, suffice it to say that my feelings are still kind of mixed, but much more complicated than I initially expected rewatching this. I think I liked it more this time, although I remembered complaining about the handling of it the first time I watched it all those years ago. Basically, we spend a good deal of time in the film just hanging out in FMA pre-Nazi Germany. For a history buff, I think it was actually kind of fascinating and hypnotizing seeing a look into the founding of the Nazi Party, done with careful use of atmosphere, dialogue, and more subtlety than I remembered. I can't think of an anime that showed Nazis in Europe that weren't, with the exception of the Thule Society, over-the-top, one-dimensional villains. It showed them as people, which in turn is one of the main themes of the movie, and one of the themes of the series that Shambala ended up focusing on. The movie is a meditation on the nature of hate and prejudice, and how anger and resentment can lead to fearing and scapegoating a person or group of people simply due to a difference of culture, belief, or something as superficial as skin color. It's the classic cautionary tale of how people, normal people, everyday people, even ones we would consider good, like in our world's Maze Hughes, or the other scientists working with this world's Al to build rockets, could be swayed by the mob when circumstances become difficult, and how we lean into the idea of simply wanting someone to blame it all on. It's a powerful idea, and certainly one that's been explored in many films and books before this, but this movie does it in its own very FMA way. Little touches about Fritz Lang's films and issues with the Treaty of Versailles, as well as the treatment of gypsies, the stand-in for the Ishvalans, really adds to the visceral nature of this world. It's animated, but much of it still rings very true. Of course, one could make the argument that that's what the whole series was about. After all, we had Führer Bradley for one thing, so the movie just coming out and saying what all the very thinly hidden allegory was in the first place could seem redundant. I do remember that being one of my issues with it years ago. I mean, the series was never hiding it. Fullmetal Alchemist basically took place in Nazi Germany. Then again, it was handled so well and so honestly in this film that I can't say it didn't feel fresh and new. One such example is the doubles in the other world, most notable for me being Fritz Lang, who is the stand-in for Bradley in this world. He was a standout character in the film for me and highlighted another big theme of the movie that does stand apart from this series a little bit. FMA talks a great deal about the capacity of humanity to create beauty and also cause destruction. I love how Lang says he will continue to make stories to inspire others despite everything that's going on around him. This seemed to me to be a bit of a love letter to FMA as a whole, but also to fiction writing, as a way to create fantastic worlds we can enjoy while still using them to echo difficult issues we face in our world. After all, this movie basically just stops and says, yeah, the monster behind the homunculi was human, but in actual history, Nazis are often cited as the worst of what people are capable of, and they are not fictional. The other big theme in the film, which kind of ties into what Lang says, is sort of another one that Fullmetal Alchemist has explored in many of its episodes. Al in Germany, who also dies, has one of the strongest arcs in the movie, as he really wants to achieve something great before he dies, having a positive impact. Alchemy and science are both tools that can be used to progress humanity forward in a positive way, but also often threatens destruction. There's always that capacity for one or the other, and sometimes the line between the two is very thin and often impacted by our decisions. I.e. rocketry and atom bombs, they are opposites but also sometimes combined. We see the destruction and also the creativity of progression in the same thing. We see the potential for creativity but also for destruction combined in something like a missile. The film ends with the brothers united and trying to use what they know to help other people of our world since they're stuck here. They are together again, separate from their own world, but accepting their role in this one, driven purely to help others instead of their own personal gain, like many alchemists that had been before in the show. As I was watching, and I kind of realized, it's the Spider-Man thing. And what did Uncle Ben say? With great power comes great responsibility? Kind of one of the themes of Fullmetal Alchemist, right? So the movie does do a great deal well, but ultimately it's somewhere between Serenity and The Scouring of the Shire for me. Maybe if it had a slightly longer runtime and just more focus on other aspects of the series, that might have helped. The plot is a little unbalanced, but the villain is easily the weakest aspect, as she's just extremely one-dimensional, forgettable, and just not threatening. She's kind of a footnote in the movie, and in my experience, may be the most forgettable one-off movie anime villain I've ever seen. Yeah, I think even Bio Broly is more memorable to me. Well, all that being said, although I certainly still loved the series, I only loved some aspects of the movie. I still don't think it's completely necessary to add finality to the first anime, but it's better than the Star of Milos, which I totally forgot, and I watched that one much more recently. Shambala kind of highlights the symbolism and themes that the series already explored, but still does it in a tasteful and poignant enough way, with a slightly different perspective. But yeah, a lot of your favorite characters don't get much to do. Notice how I didn't really mention any of them, because they really were barely there. It's worth a watch at least, and if you don't like it on your first watch, then maybe give it a few years and watch it with a different perspective. I guess I rated all the episodes of the podcast, so I say the movie is probably like a 6 out of 10 for me. Kind of the low B range. Below most episodes of the series for sure. Wow. I can't believe it. I guess this concludes my 2022 to 2023 rewatch of the FMA 2003 series. To those who've been watching or listening this past year, or who've been with this channel for a few years longer, listening to me discuss anime and other nerdy stuff, thank you for sticking around. As always, I really appreciate all the support. As usual, if I missed anything or if you'd like to share your thoughts on anything, please let me know in the comments below. To help me buy equipment and stuff, just check out my Patreon for early releases to videos, behind the scenes features, chats with me, and special video requests. Alright everybody, take care and stay magical. What anime film should I tackle next?